What really makes one country so different from another? It's not just the food or the culture. Deep down, every single nation runs on a political system. Think of it like a fundamental operating system that shapes everything: its economy, its laws, and, well, its entire destiny. So, how does that OS get written? And maybe more importantly, what happens when it starts to get corrupted?
To see what I mean, just look at Hungary's journey. Right after the fall of communism, it was on this dream trajectory, right? Embraced democracy, joined NATO, then the European Union. It was the absolute poster child for post-Soviet success. But then, right around 2010, the story takes this really sharp, unexpected turn, leading to a system that many critics today are calling a one-party state.
And that really brings us to the core puzzle we're going to dig into. How does a seemingly stable, modern democracy in the heart of Europe just start to come apart at the seams? I mean, this isn't some story from ancient history. It's happening right now, out in the open.
So first up, let's dive into what we're calling the Hungarian puzzle. This really startling journey from this beacon of democratic hope to what a lot of people now consider to be autocratic rule.
But to really get a handle on that puzzle, we've got to understand the source code running underneath it all. And it's really a tale of two fundamental ideas that dictate how pretty much any nation is run.
Let's stick with that operating system analogy. Think of it as having two core settings, or dimensions. If you can wrap your head around these two, you can understand how basically any country in the world functions.
Okay, so dimension number one is the core philosophy. On one hand, you have collectivism. This is the idea that the needs of the society as a whole are the top priority, even if that means limiting some individual freedoms. On the other hand, you have individualism, which says, no, the freedom and interests of each person come first.
And this debate is not new. It is ancient. The whole idea of collectivism goes all the way back to the Greek philosopher Plato. He was the one who argued that for the good of the majority, individual rights sometimes have to take a back seat.
Then, on the complete other side of the coin, you've got Adam Smith and his famous invisible hand. This is really the bedrock of individualism. His whole idea was that when people just pursue their own self-interest, they are guided by this invisible force to actually benefit all of society, often way more effectively than if they tried to do it on purpose. So yeah, two completely different worldviews.
Now for our second dimension. If that philosophy part is the source code, then this next part is the user interface. It's the actual rules of the game that you and I interact with every day.
So, at one end of the spectrum, you've got representative democracy. This is the system most of us know, right? Government by the people, where we elect representatives to make decisions for us. It's the exact system Hungary signed up for back in 1990.
But here's the thing. For a democracy to actually work, it needs these safeguards. And they aren't just, nice-to-haves. They are the absolute essential pillars holding the whole thing up. Things like freedom of expression, a free press, fair elections, courts that are independent, and a government that's actually accountable to the people. You start pulling out any one of those pillars and the whole system gets pretty shaky.
The polar opposite of that is totalitarianism. This is where one person or one political party holds all the power. And if you look at the definition, you can see the very first thing to go are those democratic safeguards we just talked about. They're not just weakened, they are systematically denied.
All right, so now we have our framework, the two key dimensions that define any political system. Now we can start connecting the dots and see how this actually plays out in the real world, starting back with Hungary.
The really crucial thing to understand about Hungary is that its political system didn't just collapse in some dramatic coup overnight. What it shows us is a kind of modern playbook for democratic backsliding. Instead of tanks in the streets, the system was deliberately, methodically rewritten from the inside.
So how did they do it? Well, this slide basically lays out the four-step playbook. Remember those safeguards of democracy we just talked about? They were taken apart piece by piece. Step 1, control the courts by packing them with party loyalists. Step 2, rewrite the election rules to give your side an advantage. Step 3, take control of the state media. And Step 4, use public money to enrich your political allies, which makes sure they stay loyal. And this number right here shows you just how effective rewriting those rules can be. With just 53% of the popular vote, the ruling Fidesz party walked away with a massive 68% of the seats in parliament. That gave them a supermajority, which gave them the power to change the constitution itself and basically lock in their control.
But this isn't just a Hungarian story. As the slide points out,
The case of Russia shows a really similar playbook, a slow, steady consolidation of power and a chipping away at those same democratic foundations.
I mean, just look at what's happened to the pillars of democracy here. Does this list sound familiar? It's almost a mirror image of the tactics we saw in Hungary. Since 1999, we've seen this tightening of political power, sidelining opponents, locking down the free press, and weakening the legal system. It's the same playbook for taking apart those democratic safeguards.
And a system with very few checks and balances has real-world consequences. Russia's corruption ranking from Transparency International really speaks for itself. This kind of system doesn't just slow down economic growth, it completely erodes the average person's trust in the very institutions that are supposed to be there to serve them.
So after all this theory, we finally get to the most important question. Why does any of this actually matter? How does it connect to our world?
Well, a nation's political OS isn't just some abstract concept for a textbook. It directly impacts the stability of global business, it affects international security, and maybe most importantly, it determines the fundamental rights and freedoms of millions and millions of people. Understanding this is really key to understanding how the world works today.
And all of this leaves us with one final and kind of unsettling question. Once a country's political operating system has been rewritten from the inside to favor the people in power, and all those democratic safeguards have been removed, who exactly has the power to press the undo button? That is something to think about.